Welcome, everyone. My name is Dr. Terry Hildebrandt. I'm the Director of Evidence-Based Coaching at the Fielding Graduate University. And today we're talking about Evidence-Based Coaching Thought Leaders webinar. And we have a special guest, Dr. Akasha. His topic is Walking into Ourselves, Pilgrimage as a Model for Developmental Coaching. And Akasha, welcome. Thank you. Akasha is one of our instructors in the evidence-based coaching program. He's also an alum of Fielding. Akasha has been through our PhD program in human and organizational development. I'm sure he'll say a little bit more about that. And now is in private practice, has his own company as well. So I'll just say a little bit about Akasha here. He's a pilgrim, educator, and developmental coach. With over 10 years of professional experience, he brings deep practice and interest in spirituality, adult development, and inclusive leadership for engaging across multiple social identity differences. He's a consultant with Soulfire Consulting Group and currently teaches in the evidence-based coaching training certificate program at Fielding Graduate University and the Schools of Graduate Studies in Arts and Sciences at St. George's University in Grenada. He is ever on the move and now spends most of his time between Grenada and Bermuda with his partner, their son, and a very protective and energetic cockapoo dog. And today's topic with Akasha, again, is walking into ourselves, pilgrimage as a model for developmental coaching. So Akasha, I'm going to let you say a little bit about today's topic as a way to kick us off, and how this topic became important to you.
Yeah, thanks, Terry, and it's really good to be here. And ironically, coincidentally, I am in Grenada at the moment, although not with Rishi, our protective cockapoo. But it's nice to be here. We just landed yesterday. Yeah, so this topic, it's I sort of stumbled into it in a way because 3 years ago, while I was at Fielding and the PhD program in human development, as you mentioned earlier, I had a lot of questions. Maybe three key questions, actually. There weren't really a lot. They just dominated my time and my psychological energy. So who am I was one. What am I here for? I mean, I was halfway through during my PhD program, and I was still asking those questions because partly the reason why I started the program had seemed it wasn't holding me anymore. You know, it was partly, this small, short, Jamaican black boy doing a PhD to sort of make something of himself, to be somebody was part of my intention, part of my reason. And that was losing its hold, its significance on me. And so doing a PhD was also becoming less significant. And so I was asking a lot of questions about so now what, who am I? What should I be doing with my life? And so while engaging those questions, I was in Bermuda at the time where I also live. And I've always said, you need to go on a long walk. That might help you get some answers to your questions. And I had not known anything about this particular pilgrimage at the time, the Camino de Santiago pilgrimage. But then I'd read something about it shortly after and learned that it was 500 miles and thought, 500 miles is long enough. So let's do that. And I've never walked that long before, ever. I used to walk quite a bit actually when I was a kid. It was how I was able to earn money for school, but not 500 miles at all. and it revealed dimensions of myself that I had not known existed before this walk. And, in different stages, I thought I was getting answers to different questions. Another one of those questions that I was asking is, what is God, or who is God? That was quite big and up for me at the time, because I felt like I was making some transitions around my relationship with God, or the sense of God. And so at different phases in that journey, I those questions were being answered, and answered in different ways, but also interconnected ways. And so following the walk and doing a lot of reflection, a couple of years after, because there were so many things that lots of things that changed following that walk. And I sat pretty much for about a year, almost in constant meditation. I felt paralyzed in a way. And so coming out of that, I was able to do some more reflection on actually what happened during those 500 miles. And so this conversation is a way to sort of open and discuss some of what happened, and how it relates to the journey that all of us are on, whether or not we call it a pilgrimage, but our developmental journey, the big questions that we ask at some point in our lives, how we move into those questions, and how moving into those questions reveal more about ourselves.
Excellent. So these are obviously powerful questions, right? Which is, makes up one of the core foundations of coaching.
Yeah.
So I'm really curious what triggered some of these questions coming up for you, because this is also related to big life transitions and human development, and there's like so many theories that just immediately come up, right, as you're describing this process.
Exactly, Terry. Exactly. So, human development in general. So I was 29 at the time. And if you follow some of the developmental theorists, some believe that this is around the time when people start making transitions, somewhere between year 29 and 33, around there. So like in multiples of sevens, some people would say. So in some ways, the questions I was asking at the time aligned with some of these theories around how we develop and when we develop, and perhaps even some of the triggers around our development. And you mentioned transitions. I mean, Bridges' work on transitions was significant for me post this experience to sort of make sense of it, because there was a sort of neutral zone experience that I was having at the time as well, where nothing was happening, and nothing that I could see was happening, but I felt like I was crazy. I was done.
Right.
I was paralyzed emotionally, cyclically, and so lots of changes. And so during this time, these questions, I think, came out of, there were some cultural things as well, because growing up in Jamaica, and there were some things about how I was holding myself as a cultural person, sort of focusing on purely the cultural dimensions of who I was, that also wasn't holding that much anymore. So I'm a Jamaican. What does that mean? I'm Afro-Caribbean. I'm of African descent. What does that actually really mean? So there was a point where I was questioning some of my own socialization.
Right.
What it means to be a father, what it means to be, a God-believing person, a Christian at the time. So I think there were, it just seemed like there were so many things cooking up in different dimensions of my life,
right,
that really sort of had me sort of step into these questions, and took my first step on the Camino.
Right. And I'm curious, what was that process like for you, walking the Camino?
Wow. So I could answer that in a few ways. So the physical process, I'll say first, because it's perhaps the easiest way to answer that question, and then I get into the sort of mental way. I mean, people, before I went on the Camino, people were asking, did you have to exercise or practice for it? Or, so
Mm-hmm.
I didn't have to. Some people may need to. It was all fine because, I walked maybe 13 miles or so a day.
Right.
Started very early in the morning. So that was good. And the connections that I made on the Camino were incredible. I had this theory running as well, that, early in the Camino, on the Camino, people walk the journey at different phases and for different reasons, so some people walk the entire thing, and some people start maybe 100 miles in. Some people walk the Camino over 5 years, so every year they do 2 weeks, which might cover about 150 miles or so,
Right.
and some people, whenever they want to, whenever they can. Much like life in a way, except we can't really take such a long sabbatical from life.
Right.
Although some of us may try.
I am curious, how long was it for you?
It took me about 5 weeks to walk the entire thing, averaging just about 100 miles a week. So, and that process, meeting different people was quite energizing, and seeing and people in different configurations too, because people walk alone, people walked as a couple. I walked with my partner at the time. Some people walked in groups. There were a lot of Koreans that I met on the Camino, and they were usually there in groups. Lots of young people. You meet people from all walks of life. I met people from all walks of life on the Camino. And the theory I had running was, when I meet someone for the first time on the Camino, it's a fellow pilgrim. And so there's a hello, buen camino, which is a common saying that you would hear on the Camino if you're on it, which is to have a good walk, have a good Camino. But if you meet someone for the second time, you might, sort of acknowledge, hey, I see you again. How are you doing? And you keep on going, But if you see someone by the third for 3 times, they become more of a Camino acquaintance. So at this point, you start learning about family and careers and why they're on the walk. What was it that brought them to the Camino. And by the fourth time, they're pretty much family. You have dinner together, and you talk about the albergue and the experience together, and what's waiting for you after the Camino. So there's a way that relationships also develop external to oneself. So we're all, as I'm walking, I'm certainly learning more about myself. Fellow pilgrims are doing the same, but there's something powerful that's happening as well with how we cross paths together and the conversations that we have had. And those have been quite rich experiences for me, actually. Connecting and deepening relationships on the Camino.
Right. Makes sense. Excellent. So I know you've developed a model out of this experience. Could you share a little bit about that? And I know you blogged about it on our blog, but I'm sure some people would love to go deeper and understand what's come out of this for you from a scholarly perspective.
All right. So I'll put the model on the screen here as well for those who aren't familiar with it. And the developing pilgrimage model is what I've called it for now, because I've said a few times, as I walked the Camino, one of the things that was clear to me was that I was walking into myself, and by that I mean I was understanding, revealing different dimensions of myself as well. I mentioned the cultural piece. Then there's also the spiritual dimension of who I am that I hadn't been paying much attention to. And then there is even the part of who I am that's seeing all of this, all of these constructions, I would say, these personalities or ego constructs, that I met, I would say, for the first time in the Camino. Because a part of taking a walk like this is that it's such a mindfulness experience, and I think walking like this creates a gateway into deeper reaches into consciousness. That was my experience. And I think it can be the same for many others, in fact. Because there's something about walking that allows us to be free from, and especially walking on a pilgrimage where we have left life behind, so to speak, that allows us to be free of those things. And I think when we become sort of free of life in general, the hustle and bustles of life, we create some sort of space, intentionally or unintentionally, we create some space to actually see ourselves and to walk more and more into ourselves, or true nature, or just consciousness of ourselves. And as I'm walking, I'm noticing that my ideas about who I am, and I've heard fellow pilgrims and folks, and based on other research studies, speak about something similar. So I'm noticing that the ideas I have about myself is unfolding as I'm walking. They're changing, they're developing, they're expanding, they're becoming clearer. And a part of also what's happening is that I'm finding that I'm having more capacity to embrace the parts of myself that I'd either rejected, suppressed, denied, or even some that I overly embraced. So it was a shift in relationship between how I was viewing those identities. And so they were unfolding, new ones as well as the existing ones. I was seeing different dimensions of those identities. And then as I'm walking, and these things aren't so linear as I'm making it seem, it's like they're all happening in such a dynamic way and a co-occurring way. So I'm noticing that my ideas about goals and purpose were also shifting. It's a big question that people take on the Camino with them. What is next for me? People walk the Camino when they are thinking about a divorce, after they have divorced, they're changing careers, they're changing location, so a lot of, there's already this buildup of energy around change and transition that people usually take with them in the Camino. So it sort of makes sense that for me and many others, our purpose and ideas about our career is also unfolding. It sometimes becomes clearer, sometimes it becomes fuzzier. Sometimes we just know, what, when I leave, when I end this walk, I'm not going to be doing this thing anymore. So that's even a part of the unfolding of purpose. And it goes even deeper than that, because I'm also suggesting with this model and around purpose that there is also a close relationship between our realization of our unfolding self, coming into a new idea of who we are, and the relationship between what our purpose is. So I think as we come more fully into who we are, our purpose also becomes clearer. So again, that sort of synergetic way that identity and purpose unfolds. And then unfolding God. And for me, God really represents whatever our sense of a higher power is. Our idea of that shifts. So at one point, early in the walk, Terry, I said to myself, well, if I were just landing, in this body, in this world for the very first time, how would I go about finding what God is, or what is actually going on here? Was really what I was asking. What is actually going on here outside of me, bigger than me? And that question took me for a spin, and it really shifted my whole view of and my relationship of God, from God as how I was brought up in a Christian church, this high and mighty being that sits on a throne in the heavens with a scepter in one hand and something else in another hand that I can't remember right now. To a being that is it's embodied, so there isn't necessarily a physical manifestation of this being, to something that is that is that is not separated from anything else. So the ability to see God in all things, or see life, as I would say, or a principle that pervades all things, from the way trees grow to the way we walk, to the way I was walking in the Camino. So that experience of a power and the presence and the principle that transcends a physical being. So I noticed that was changing within me, and I had suspicion that that was happening for other people, and tested some of this, that our idea of God changes as we develop. And then unfolding love. This is a big one for me because love is something that we can see as quite personal, in our romantic relationships, in our relationships with our kids, with our friends, to seeing love as something that is also impersonal. So it's moved from being subjective to my ideas of what it is, or my experience of what it is, something that is universal and all-inclusive and all-encompassing as well. And so there is a way that love also moves and grows and expands as we are also developing. Because the thing that's happening in this model, and that happened on the pilgrimage for me, I would say, is that my awareness expanded. Because I think many of these things are already set. Our identity is already there. Our purpose is perhaps already there. This presence or being that some call God, or the Tao, or the way, or whatever it is there. Love is also there as this energy that's already present. So I'm not manifesting any of these things. I'm just coming into awareness of it. And I think this is what's happening with all of us as we develop. We're coming into greater, broader, deeper realization of who we are, our purpose, a God, or love.
Right. Excellent. So could you say a little bit about the ocean of meaning and the dynamic witnessing? I'm curious about those two pieces.
Yeah. So the ocean of meaning, we're human. There's a saying, I think Keegan, who is a adult developmentalist, talk about us being meaning-making machines. And although I don't think we're machines, I think we are meaning-making beings. I think we're constantly making meaning. Right now I'm making meaning of how this conversation is going with you, and how other people are thinking about it. It's like we can't stop, and so we swim in this ocean of meaning. We cannot escape it. As long as we are breathing and we are conscious, we are making meaning. It's what we do as much as breathing. We breathe as we make meaning, or make meaning as we breathe. So this ocean of meaning is really an acknowledgement that this is what we're doing, and the unfolding of identity and purpose and love and God is just another meaning that we're making. At some points, we might get to the place where we're like, oh, this is it. This is who I am, or this is what my purpose is, or this is what love is, or now I understand what God is. And I think the mistake we make is when we actually stop. Although it's actually quite natural to stop there to say, okay, this is who I am. But I also think that's going to change. That's why it's unfolding. So if we can hold on to these ideas in a looser way, it's like, oh, so this is my sense of who I am right now. To recognize that we are unfolding. And the relevance for that for coaches too is also recognizing that our clients, so first of all, it's acknowledging, recognizing, celebrating their sense of purpose, identity, love, God, and so on, whatever it is for them. But as coaches, also realize that these might also unfold. So today they might stand firm, and a client might stand firm in their identity as a parent, as a father or a mother. And in 2 years, that completely shifts when the child goes off to college. Like, who am I now? I now need to figure out who it is that I am and what's my purpose here. So we're constantly unfolding, and we're making meaning in this ocean of meaning, of very existence. And so the dynamic witnessing space is also a place where I'm proposing that a coach or an educator or a mentor sits in a way. And it's dynamic because there's a lot of movements happening with the unfolding. Unfolding indicates dynamism already, because nothing unfolds in a static way. And so even while one is witnessing, let's say a coach is witnessing the unfolding of a client, they're not just witnessing it. They're not just sitting and watching, I wonder what's going on with Mary right now. So the dynamic also refers to our engagement with people as they are developing, as they are transitioning. And the way we do that looks differently for every coach. And that depends on the coach's own development. It depends on, the coach's own sense of identity, how tightly they're holding on to that identity. I'm a coach and I'm going to help this client change and I'm going to help them realize their goals. If we hold on to our roles as coach so tightly, I think we may miss out on the dynamism and miss out on some of the unfolding of what's happening with the client, because there's a lot happening with us. So the dynamic witnessing space is actually an invitation for the coach to say, actually hold our identity as coach loosely as well, and be curious about even our unfolding as the client is unfolding. Because as we know, coaching is such a mutual relationship, that we, as much as our clients are changing, something is happening with us as well. So there's a recognition that there is a symbiotic experience that's happening here, even while it's the client's agenda that's privilege, that's the main deal. Something is happening with us, and we can be with a client in that space of just being humans, that we're all changing and growing. Maybe not at the same time, definitely not at the same time, definitely not in the same way, but it's a condition of who we are as human beings. And it also speaks to this dynamic witnessing space, also speaks to power in coaching, Terry. Because coaches have a lot of power, I think. Because I've worked with clients who sometimes look to me to tell them what to do. Because you're a coach and you have experience and you've worked with so many people. Please, Akasha, tell me how to fix this problem. Tell me how to be better. And that's such a trap. And there's a need there. Clients want to know what to do. So the dynamic witnessing space is an invitation for coaches to, when the time, some of this is our own self-assessment. When is it time to witness versus when is it time to actually, go in and be a little bit more on the dance floor with the client,
right.
And the power in that is we are not the only ones that's holding the space for the client's development. We're doing it with the client. There's a sort of we holding up the space that's happening. And I would even say that the space itself, because of the energy that we put into it, is also a part of the holding of the client's growth and development. So the thing for coaches to pay attention to, I'm suggesting in this model, is the idea that they're the ones that's holding the space for the clients and for the client's growth. We are a part of holding the space, a part of that equation, but we are not the only ones holding the space. The client is the what gets created in our relationship together is also its own entity that's holding the space. And I'm suggesting the space itself, however we choose to call that. We could say, oh, it's the god of coaching, or just energy. or the universe, whatever it is, there is something else that's holding the space for all of us to grow and develop.
Right. You might call it the collective unconscious.
We might call it the collective unconscious. Works perfectly for me, Terry. That's how I think about it.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you.
Yeah, to quote Carl Jung.
Carl Jung.
Yeah.
Exactly. And it's interesting you mentioned that, because I've been thinking about that a lot more these days, both as it relates to this model, but also in my own coaching work, and paying more attention to it and acknowledging the collective unconscious more, because we come into knowing in different ways. And I believe that one of the core ways that we do that is through what's already out there, what we collectively know. So I, Akasha, as a singular being, don't know crap, don't know anything, from anything. I think my knowing has to do with what we collectively know and who we collectively are. And a part of my practice, as I'm outing myself here, part of my practice is to swim more and more in that collective unconscious, what we know together, and opening myself up to what we know together. So I'm listening to the client's own knowing, even without them having to say anything. And then I test it. So I'm not going, and I'm not suggesting that we, have the idea that because we are listening to the collective unconscious that we actually know anything. That defeats the whole purpose.
Right.
We test the unconscious, the collective unconscious as well, about what is it that we think we know.
Yeah. It's I sometimes call it level 4 listening. If you're familiar with the level 1, 2, and 3 is what we often hear about in the coaching literature, right? But level 4 is listening with the spiritual ear for a much broader, like you might call it, the collective unconscious wisdom.
Terry, I don't want to and I don't think you are either. And I feel like there is so much untapped resource and power in that way of listening. So I give you an example that I hope won't spook anyone on this call. Just days ago, I'm talking with someone in a coaching conversation with someone, and they feel no one understands them right now because they're going through such a crazy experience in their life. And I said, well, do you want to test it out with me to see if I can at least understand you? And they reluctantly said, or challenge me, sure, go ahead, prove me right. And so I, in my own way, quiet myself, close my eyes and allowed myself to see what this person was seeing, to see life from their side. To feel life from their side. And I was immediately brought into a world that was so dark, physically dark. And it was groundless. I was falling, Terry. There was nowhere to put my feet on, nothing to grasp onto. It was lonely. It was dark. It felt like the end of the world. All I could focus on right now as I'm being with this client was right now. Like my grasping, my groundlessness, my aloneness. And it brought me to tears. And I'm describing this to the person I'm talking with. And they're just weeping.
Right.
They're weeping. They're like, oh. And they keep looking at me. It's like, you get it. You get it. And I couldn't help myself. I started weeping as well partly because for months, I had not seen this. And I was under the impression that this person could just, turn their lives around. I know they had a tough time, but they could just, find some new ground, build some new foundation. But when I'm in their world, in this dynamic witnessing space, seeing things from their perspective, there was no material to even think about building any new foundation. And I'm like, oh crap, what was I asking this person to do? This is ridiculous. And I apologize. So the power in in almost leaving our place, our position to be in this dynamic witnessing space, in this collective unconscious, to be with our clients from their position can reveal so much, and it takes, I would say, it takes a great deal of trust and compassion and courage to be able to step into this place. You know, and as you said, this fourth level listening, it's like stepping outside of our own sense organs, you know, to listen. You know, it's a listening of the unconscious. It's the listening of us, of our collective, and that's quite powerful to me. You know, at that level, I don't even know if there's actually coaching in the traditional sense that's going on, as opposed to being with, and then perhaps building, drawing from some coaching tools and ideas in that being with. So we're not entering with, I have this tool to use on you right now.
Right. It's more of what ICF would call presence, right?
Yes.
In the core competencies, and then active listening, where you're being with and entering into their world, you know, even in a spiritual sense, which is what you're talking about here.
Exactly.
And it does take I think some courage and trust that you can do that and come back, you know, from it, right?
Exactly. I was gonna mention that, Terry. You got it. The courage that one, if you allow yourself to enter one's world so fully, the trust that you can come back and be you, although the you that one be or bees after that might not be the same. And I think it is all well and good, because my sense is that it's an expanded sense of being, expanded self of I as coach, an expanded self as coach, or self as instrument, or self as whatever. That going there into another's world and coming back, we get bigger, as well as the person we have served has gotten bigger.
Absolutely. So, Akasha, you've done a beautiful job of describing this model, and clearly you embody it, right, through your examples and just your being today with us. And I also want to open this up to our audience. You know, we have some loyal listeners here that I'm sure would love to offer some thoughts or questions and join into this conversation, which is a really important conversation. This is, you know, in the realm of spiritual coaching, but life coaching, but it applies in every client situation in some ways, because we're always all looking for deeper meaning at some level. And it's such a foundational skill and foundational piece of coaching that I'm really thrilled to have you here and talk about this. So I'd like to see if anyone on the call would like to offer a reflection or question or join in, and if so, go ahead and come on live. I'm going to unmute folks at this point, and you can unmute yourself as well.
Oh, they're gone. I was like, oh.
Anyone who'd like to join us with a question or reflection. And you can also...
Akasha and Terry, this is Viv.
Hi, Viv.
Hi, Viv.
I'm curious if there are particular spiritual practices that you use in addition to your time on El Camino in the past, presently, to stay tuned for the work that you're doing.
Wow, Viv. It's good to see you. Thanks for being here. And what a beautiful question. And yes. So I learned to meditate while walking the Camino, actually, and it's become a staple, a staple practice of mine. And I found, Terry, and I'd love to hear your thoughts on this. I found that the deeper I get into this way of being with people, this way of coaching, that my own practice becomes even more important, Viv. So my meditation practice becomes that much more important. So whereas I may have been meditating once or twice a day, I find that I'm now compelled to do it at least 3 times a day, or even in between sessions, just to sit and be with. It's like a letting go practice for me in a way as well. So there is that, and just a lot of journaling. Terry knows I love to write quite a bit, and so I journal a lot. Some of it is just my own reflection, what I've been noticing, what has been calling to me, life's calling to me to go deeper and deeper. And Viv, I think mostly just being still, being still, being still and listening.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah, excellent. We also have a question from Lisa. Lisa, would you like to ask it, or would you prefer if I read it for you?
Sure, I can ask it. Thank you. And just wanted to say thanks, Akasha, for sharing your insights and your journey with us. And have a question about coming from the context or space of education and working with students of different age ranges developmentally in a space where they're transitioning to applying to college and often identified externally by others' goals, parents' goals, and how we can invite others to intergenerationally kind of find and share that space of solidarity in their experience.
Yeah. Well, Lisa, thanks. Thanks for being here and for that question. I think it's so important because, there are many in the adult development world. I think of Baxter McGolder in particular, who think of, the college years as a time when people are beginning to self-author themselves, to use some of Keegan's language. Keegan's talk about these 4 or 5 stages of development. And one of them is from socialize, which according to his model, most humans are. And then from there, one becomes to self-author themselves, find their own agency, to move from social constructs and expectations that you're talking about, Lisa. And that can be a very tough transition for people, because it's actually saying, you know what, I'm leaving my family, or I'm leaving my church, I'm leaving this group, this community that's been a resource to me. And I'm going to try and figure out my own way, my own path. So that it's quite powerful, and it's quite disorienting, and it's quite painful and powerful and joyful and all those things all together for people. So if we as coaches, as educators, can hold space for that, to at least acknowledge that there is an unfolding that's happening when people are making that shift. And it can be quite tough and challenging, that what they might need, at least in this early stage, is some acknowledgement, that, hey, you've been this person for a very long time, and it has served you really well. And now you're stepping into something new, and to sort of help them hold themselves in that space. Sometimes that's all that's needed. So a part of the challenge now is when educators might not have this perspective of growth and development. And so they might resist the change, they might suppress the change, or push people too much or too far into it, without acknowledging everyone's own, because we change and develop in our own time, and each one of us in our own unique way. So there's a way that it's important to acknowledge this, acknowledge that we're all growing and developing, and we're all doing it in our own time. So that's Robert Keegan, Lisa.
I'll put it in the
Thanks, Terry. And you can also look at Baxter McGolder for work on self-authorship in college students. So what you're pointing to is so critical in terms of educators having this developmental view, this developmental perspective to add to their pedagogy, their just their way of working with students is also essential. And I guarantee it helped create space for everyone. You know, the way that they support learners and the way that learners can step into their own agency. Although I'm doing this, and sometimes they may leave school, sometimes they may switch majors because, I've realized I want to do something different from what my parents wanted me to do. I experience this, quite a bit as well, especially with some Asian students and different contexts that I teach in. Because, in Grenada here, it's a medical school, and there's so many Koreans and Japanese who are here because their parents want them to be doctors, and they're struggling. They're like, I want to be a photographer, I want to be an artist, and at the same time their parents have paid for it. So it's not an easy thing. It's actually quite tough. And I think more than anything, what they need, what students need, is compassion, or what Marian, I'm not sure if I'm saying your name right, Marian, when you talk about extreme empathy. Although I'm sort of hesitant about the word extreme, but empathy, expansive empathy, to just be with them in their struggles, in their transition from being socialized to their own agency. I hope that answers your question, Lisa. If not, let us know.
Yes, thank you. Yeah, so much, definitely.
And for those new to adult development theory, some other key folks you might want to check out. Robert Keegan's certainly a Harvard developmentalist psychologist. His Evolving Self book was kind of the original book, and then he wrote In Over Our Heads, and more recently Immunity to Change with Lisa Leahy. Ken Wilber's also a huge writer in this space. And his book Integral Spirituality is a good introduction. And someone also put Suzanne Cook-Greuter. She does some great work in this space as well, and in ego development. And then Terry O'Fallon.
That's right. Terry O'Fallon is also great. Her stages.
There's also for stages of faith development. Fowler also has written a lot. So there's many developmental theorists, and this is one of Fielding's specialties. Certainly in the PhD program, but also in the evidence-based coaching program, we emphasize developmental psychology and developmental theory a great deal. And I would agree with Akasha that recognizing as a coach when one of your clients might be going through one of these stage transitions, they can often be very disoriented, even depressed, or certainly dissatisfied with their life. And you can begin to see the signs sometimes, and then begin to hold them, I would agree, and move them forward. So powerful tools and models for developmental coaching.
Terry, can I make a comment or ask a question?
Yes, and if you could say your name as well, that'd be helpful.
Darren Fafan.
Darren, great, thank you.
Akasha, thank you so much, and Terry, thanks for this riveting and very informative discussion. I was very moved by your description of your client's state, or at least your perception of entering into that space. And I'm actually kind of curious about whether you think that's almost inevitability or some kind of prerequisite in letting go of the self-concept and entering into a free fall of that, kind of nature. And if we as coaches have a role in entering them into that space, or at least witnessing them into that space, and then helping them to reconstruct a self-identity coming out of that.
Well, so I noticed the thing that standing out for me is, when you said prerequisite, do you mean prerequisite for the coach to understand this and to be willing to let go of their self-concept as well, Darren?
I mean, in the experiential journey that one goes into self-realization, that I'm finding more and more that there's a commonality of experience of hitting rock bottom, or some type of experience that darkness, that non-solidity, kind of creates the environment for then re-emergence of a clearer sense of self.
So Akasha, if I understand, you talk about the crisis that often is created externally that can move people into the next stage of development. Is that sound right, Darren?
Yes, it's I guess it externalizes as some kind of crisis. Yes. The internal description of the darkness, the free fall, the no foundation. That's an internal experience of it, right?
Yes.
And we are saying about letting go of self-concept, and to me, that letting go of self-concept actually almost requires that sense of nothingness, free fall.
I see what you mean. Although not necessarily. Like, I think again, like it may look, and likely is experienced differently by different people, and also I would suggest that different stages of their development. Like some shift from one self-concept to another might not be so disorienting, for example. And I think there are some, and I don't know all the reasons why, I think there are some that are quite disorienting in the way that we are describing here. Quite stark, quite dark, quite, sort of dark night of the soul, for using another term here in the spiritual discipline. And I don't necessarily know what makes them different, Darren. And there are internalized experiences that may or may not be this way, that precludes these shift in self-concepts like you're pointing to, I think. And I don't know if they're all the same. And I think that these internalized experiences, in the way that we're talking about them, can lead to some shift in one whole themselves. And to your other question or comment about how do we, like, what's our role in supporting people around constructing a new sense of self? And we clearly can't do that for anybody. And to even think that we can, or to push ourselves into it, is dangerous for everyone involved. And I think sense of self, in a way, also forms itself. Like, it has its own energy. And I think for the most part, what we're doing is helping to hold the space for that, being curious with our clients or our loved ones, but what is it that they might have a sense of what's calling them now, a sense of who they are becoming, who they are being. This is, I think, where powerful coaching questions come into play, and presence, like what Terry mentioned earlier, but not preemptively saying, "Oh, you are a this now."
No, yeah. So my question was more around, or the observation was more around, I think the instinct is to help, right? So if somebody is in this state or approaching this state, and you would see crisis, they would be maybe asking for help in some particular way. And I'm wondering, is entering into that state actually the only way out?
I know I'm seeing your other question so clearly. So in terms of, is the only way out for both, I mean, two things now. Is the only way out for the coach to enter into that space with the client so that they can be seen, feel seen, or for the client to go into that dark space? Is the only way out for them is to go into that dark space?
Yes, right.
Yeah.
That's second.
Yeah.
I mean, the first question is actually interesting too, because somebody said, when they said extreme empathy, and you know, it's always my understanding that we have to be careful about how far we get drawn in, just energetically,
Yes.
to the client's
Yes.
story and to the
Yes.
emotions involved, because then there's
Yes.
a danger of being entrained.
Yeah, and I think we might be there are different ways to even be looking at that danger, because I think the way that I'm suggesting that we enter their world, to me seems to present less danger, because there's a sense of readiness that one can, and there isn't much that the coach or that person is holding on to in terms of what can I lose now, you know. So they are not so firmly holding on to an identity of coach, so they can let go and be with. That's also what I mean by, you know, they can become expanded, bigger, and also empty. The other thing, Darren, is there is power. There is so much power in being seen. So this is partly what I'm saying with this model as well, and what we're doing as coaches. And even to your question, Lisa, there's power in being seen. So people going through their changes, their groundlessness, their darkness, their loneliness, and being seen in that space, being seen brings light. Being seen creates ground for them to stand on, or some railing for them to hold on to. But this being seen has to be genuine, you know, really allowing oneself to see from where they sit or stand. Just being seen. You know, in the African tradition, there's a term called sawabona. It's a way that people greet each other. And it's simple saying, namaste is similar. You know, it's the sawabona, I see you. As coaches, this is a large part of what I'm suggesting we're doing. It's like, I see you, client Suzanne, I see you. And then, even without words, Darren, but the sense of, you know, being able to really see from their position and feel from their position, and articulating it in a way that creates resonance, where they can say, I feel seen, or Jacona in response to Sarabona. I actually feel seen. And that really begins to create some solid ground and begin to help one sort of, you know, construct their new sense of self, their new identity. So more than anything, more than even understanding about identity formation and identity development, let's open our eyes as coaches and see people in their world, see their world.
So, Akasha, that's a beautiful place for us to begin to wrap up on. And, you know, I really want to thank you for your time today. This is obviously an ongoing conversation, and I just want to really thank you and honor your work and what you're doing for the world of coaching and for fielding and for us this day on a Saturday. So thank you for being here and who you are and what you bring. And thank you for all of our listeners and participants today as well. I also just have a couple of quick announcements that I'd like to offer to everyone. And if you give me just a moment, I'm going to share my screen. If you go to coach.fielding.edu, you can access all of our recordings of these professional series as well as thought series of videos. So right here, you'll see a button. When you click on that, it'll bring up other videos from the past, and we will be posting this particular video as well under on this website. And if you want to check out our blog, Akasha has also written a blog regarding this model for coaching and pilgrimage. So I encourage you to read that if you haven't seen it. You can also go to our blog at any time to see our upcoming webinars. So we actually have one next week, and next week is what we call our professional series webinar, where we bring together a number of leaders in the coaching world to talk about various topics. So our topic for next Wednesday, November 20th, is coaching in the legal profession. And we have 3 attorneys who are also certified coaches and either students, faculty, or alumni of Fielding. So please join us. You'll hear from Banks Pecht and Dennis White and Jeff Schneider. They're all very accomplished coaches and as well as attorneys. So they'll be talking about how you can use coaching in the field of law and that intersection, and how, really we argue at Fielding that coaching has a place in every profession. So these evidence-based coaching professional series are focused on that. Then we will be also having, soon after that, Akasha will be back with Magda Casberry. And we don't quite yet have this blog posted yet, so if you want to say a little bit about Akasha, just as a preview, people can hear more about Akasha soon. So if you wouldn't mind saying just a maybe 15-second commercial.
Yeah, sure. What Magda and I are proposing here is that we be even more effective coaches if we understand and take into consideration clients' their cultural dimension as well as our own understanding of culture and the role it plays in a coaching relationship. So we're saying, coach isn't a one hat fit all. We bring if we bring our cultural sensitivity, cultural awareness, multicultural awareness in the way that we interact with clients, that can also improve the relationship and the way clients experience our interventions.
Great, excellent. And that webinar will be on December 4th. That's a Wednesday again, from 4 to 5 Pacific. So we hope you can join us again to hear Akasha and Magda on December 4th, 4 to 5 Pacific. One other quick announcement: we also are currently taking call for proposals for our annual evidence-based coaching conference. So our conference is also located on the same website, thecoach.fielding.edu. You can click on EBC Conference and learn all about our conference, which will be May 7th through 9th, 2 days of power-packed workshops and networking opportunities to connect with all things evidence-based coaching. And this is open to anyone, not just Fielding folks, but everyone in the universe who would like to join us. And if you are interested in potentially putting together a proposal, you can scroll down and see, click here to submit a proposal, and there's a short online application for that. And for those who may want to participate as a sponsor and come in and have some visibility to your organization, or just give back to Fielding, we're also accepting sponsorships for the 2020 conference. We hope to see you there. Registration will be open soon for this event. The website is up, but we're currently not yet taking money, but we will be in the next month or so. So stay tuned for that, and make sure you register. Our early bird registration ends on March 1st, and it's only $500, which is a great deal for a 2-day conference of this type. We're also going to be meeting in the beautiful Santa Barbara hotel right on the beach. This is literally what it looks like out there. So it's a beautiful location, and May is also a great time of the year to visit Santa Barbara. So we hope you will join us for our conference in 2020. So again, thank you all for joining, and we're going to go ahead and close out today's meeting. Thank you, Akasha, and we look forward to seeing you again on December 4th.
Thanks, everyone. It's good to be here and to see and just talk with you.
Take care, everyone.
Bye, everyone.
Bye for now.